lecture, we'll be looking at the methods of the objects, how we can add a method into an object. So let's get into it. Okay, so to getting started with this one, I just need to pick the object which we created in the previous lectures, one of the previous lecture. Right, so I'll do a small modification in this one. Okay, so instead of this age, I will add birthday here, and it will be okay. So if you remember, I have said like in the object we can store key value pairs, and the keys are the properties of an object, right? And in the value for that particular key we can store anything. It could be string, it could be number, it could be a boolean value. And here is the thing, in one of the previous lectures, while talking about functions, I have said like functions are also another kind of values, right? So that means if it is a value, then we can store a function also as a value for this property, right? Because in object, end of the day, we are just storing values for the properties, right? So let's see how we can add a function as a value for this particular object. So to add a function, what we need to do is we just need to create a new property. Let's say calculate age, and then what this property will do, it will basically calculate the age of the Raunak. Okay, and here we will be writing an function expression. Okay, I'm saying this is a function expression because it is almost similar to the function expression. Okay, function, and then we don't write any name for this particular function, and in parameter I'll pass birth year, and here we will return the birth year, or we can say the current year, let's say 2024, minus the birth year. So this is how we are calculating the age based on some year, right, from past few lectures. So this way we have created a method inside of an object, or we can say we have added a property which is storing a function. And I have said like this is almost similar to a function expression. So let me show you how. So this is how we write a function expression, right? We use a variable declaration, then a function name, or we can say a variable name, and then we store anonymous function into it. Okay, so that is why I have used the term function expression while adding it into some property, so that you can easily remember the syntaxes to write a method into an object. And we call this function a method. And why is that so? Because whenever you are adding a function into a property for an object, that is called a method. Or short and simple, we could say a function inside of an object is called a method. Okay, so whichever function we create within an object, that function is called a method. And this is how we write a function. And how we are gonna use this, let's see. So right now we have created an object. So similar to the other properties, the way we used to call the other properties, this is also a property of Raunak data, right? So let me show you how we call it. Let's pick this one. So Raunak data 2, and then all we need to do is we need to use this dot and then calculate age, and here we will pass our birth year. Okay, since it is also a property of Raunak data 2 object, so we can access it with the dot operator, right? Or we can also access it using the square bracket notation, as we have seen already in the previous lectures how we access the properties of an object. So these are the two ways, and then let me show you one by one both the uh, function calls or method calls. So this one gave us 28 in return. So what it did, it took the birth year and then it calculated and returned that value. Okay, so this is how we can call a method of an object. Okay, so what we cannot do inside of an object is we cannot write a function declaration directly. So for example, if I take this function, let me copy it quickly. I cannot write it like this: function calc age, and then let me remove these comments. Okay, so it started giving us errors. That means we cannot add a function declaration inside of an object. All we can do is we can just create a method, or we can store an anonymous function inside of a property into a function or into an object. Okay, so let me remove it quite quickly. Now if I refresh, our example is back to normal. Okay, so this is one of the way of calling a method of an object, and this is another way where we are using the square bracket notation, and these are the similar things, because end of the day we are just calling a property, right? And since this property stored is holding a function as a value, so we need to use this parenthesis to call that function. Just like this variable, or we can say this property is holding a string, this property is holding a number, this property is holding an array where we have accessed the length or some other stuff, if you remember from the previous lectures, like this one, friends.length. Same way, for this property we have stored a whole function. So to call that function we have to use this parenthesis, and if it is asking us for some parameter, then we have to pass some arguments into it as well. Okay, so now after refreshing we got our 28 twice. That means it is coming from both the console logs, both the method calls. Okay, so now if you might have noticed, I have used this 1996 here, but it was already there in the object, right? And instead of using this 1996 here, we can use this birth year itself, because we are already violating the dry principle by writing the birth year again and again. Let me show you why. So suppose if you are using this calculate age function somewhere else, for example, if you want to store the Raunak's calculated age in some other variable, and there accidentally you have passed, instead of 1996 you have passed, let's say instead of 1993, then you will get a wrong calculated age of Raunak, right? Because in Raunak object the birth year is 1996 and his age is 28, but since you have passed this 1993, it will give you a wrong age of Raunak, right? So to prevent this thing, what we will do, instead of reading the birth year from the parameter, we will access the Raunak object's birth year itself inside of this function. And let me show you how. Okay, so let me comment this one for your reference, and then I'll copy this and paste it here again. And instead of using this birth year, what I will do, I will use this dot birth year. Okay, and what this particular keyword is doing, it is simply pointing to the parent of the function. Okay, so right now the parent of this function is this object, right? So this function, this property is stored inside of Raunak data object, right? So Raunak data is a parent of this function. So this keyword will point to Raunak data. So right now this is basically equals to Raunak data object. Okay, so that is why we are able to access this birth year, which is present in Raunak data 2 as a property using this keyword. Okay, so before logging this thing, let me show you what we are getting in the this keyword first, right? So as to remove the confusion, let's see what we are getting in this keyword. And don't worry, we will dive way deeper into this keyword in the upcoming lectures, because I have a separate topic where I am covering this keyword. Okay, so let's see what we will get inside of this. So if I refresh, okay, I have called it multiple times, let's comment. If I refresh, then you can already see this is already pointing to the parent of this function. That means it is pointing to Raunak data 2 object. That is why we are getting all the properties which were present inside of this Raunak data 2. Okay, so that is why we were able to access this dot birth year. Okay, that is why we were able to access this dot birth year, because it is internally working like this. Let me quickly add it for your reference. So this is similar to Raunak data 2, and it is accessing birth year from the Raunak data 2, so it is working like this. Okay, so whenever you are using a method, if you are using this, then it will point to the parent of that particular function. So right now we are using this calculate age. So the parent of this function is Raunak data 2, because this function is written inside of this particular object, or we can say it is called inside of this object, this Raunak data 2 object. So this will point to parent of function, or we can say where the is getting called. Okay, parent of the function, or where the function is getting called. So right now this Raunak data 2 is calling this calculate age function. Okay, so that is why this is pointing to Raunak data 2. Okay, so right now we don't need this 1996 anymore, since we are using it internally. we are using the birth year of this object, so it will calculate the age based on this Raunak data 2 object's birth year. Okay, if I refresh it, then again we got 28. Okay, so right now most of you will ask, since it is a way too confusing thing, then why we are using this instead of simply using Raunak data 2 dot birth year like this, because this will also return the Raunak data 2's birth year, right? Because this way also we are accessing the birth year property of Raunak data 2, right? So to answer this question, let me copy it and paste it here, and I'll comment this one. Okay, so just give me a second. So suppose if you are using this Raunak data 2 and then birth year, obviously it will work the same way, but it is not the ideal thing, and let me tell you why. So in future, let's say you have changed the name of Raunak data 2 to something else, for example Raunak data 7. Okay, so now this function's code will break totally, right? Because if we are changing something here, then we are already breaking the dry principle, and we have to change it wherever we have used this Raunak data 2, Raunak data 7. Okay, so if I refresh, then you can already start seeing Raunak data 2 is not defined. That means we have to find wherever we have used Raunak data 2 and we have to change it to Raunak data 7. Okay, so as to make it work. See, here also we had this Raunak data 2, here also we need to change, otherwise it will keep on throwing the error. Okay, so now after changing all the places wherever we have used this Raunak data 2 to Raunak data 7, then only it started working. So let me revert it back. Instead of using the property directly with the object name, we prefer using this, because with this, even if we change it to 7, then we don't have to worry, because it will point to the parent object only. Whatever is the name, it doesn't matter. Okay, it will just read the key of its parent function, parent object we can say. So you can already see, after refreshing we are getting our function and it is working just fine. Okay, so now there is another use case of the method. Let me show you. Suppose you have created a function, you have created a method inside of a function, right? So that is totally fine. Suppose you want to call it in multiple places, you want to use Raunak's age in multiple places. Okay, and right now this piece of code contains only just 2 or 3 lines. This function block contains just 2 3 lines, or we can say just 1 line. So it is totally fine. In case if it contains some good amount of code, then calling it multiple times is not an optimal solution, right? So instead of doing this, instead of calling it multiple times, can't we store a new property into this Raunak data 7 object containing the calculated age of Raunak data 7? Obviously we can do that, and let me show you how. Okay, so let me comment out this also for your reference, and we will use this one. Let me remove the comments. And from the previous lectures you might have I think remembered like how we can create a new property inside of an existing object. We need to use dot operator or the square brackets. Okay, so we'll go with the dot operator. So this dot, and then let's say age. So what it will do, as you can already see, this is pointing to Raunak data 7. So right now this is equals to Raunak data, let me make it 2 because we have used Raunak data 2 here in examples. Okay, and let's change these also by using command D. I can select multiple things of the same name and we can change it simultaneously with the help of multiple cursors. And in Windows I think it will be Control D. Okay, so now we are creating a new property inside of Raunak data 7. Since it doesn't have the age property, it will create a new one using this dot operator, or we can also do it using the square brackets notation. So what we will do, this dot age equals to 2024 minus birth year, this dot birth year, that means Raunak data 7 dot birth year. Okay, so what we can do is we can either return something, or even if we don't return something it will work just fine. But the good thing is, or we can say the good practice is to return whatever we have wrote inside of a function. Okay, so we will return the age. From this function. Okay, so after doing this stuff, let me format it quickly. Okay, so after doing this stuff, what it will do, once we have called this method, it will calculate the birth year, or we can say the age of Raunak, and then it will store it inside of this age property, and this age property will be added into this Raunak data 7 object. Okay, so let's see, let's comment the rest of the function calls for now. Raunak data 2 is not defined, that is because we have used 7 here. Okay, so now we got this 28, and if I console log Raunak data 2, then you can see a new property is being added here. Okay, so here we can see age is also added because of this. Okay, this is pointing to Raunak data 2, so age property was not there inside of this. So with the help of dot operator, this age property got added into this object, and we have stored the calculated age into this age variable or property. Okay, so that is why it is storing the correct age of Raunak into this age property. Okay, so this is how we can dynamically add a property using the methods as well. So with the help of this, all we need to do is, instead of calling this multiple times, what we can do is we can simply use age. Okay, let me show you this first. Calling it multiple times also work fine, but instead of calling a function multiple times, what we can do, we can simply use the stored value, which is age. Okay, so we have called this function only once, which is here. Then after that, we are not calling this function, we are calling this age because its returned value is already stored in this age variable. So instead of calling function, we can make use of this. Okay, and let me show you one more thing, guys. So this is something related to object methods, and in past few lectures we have used the length, right? Length inside of an friends array. So I just quickly want to make a bridge here. Let me show you a magical thing. So remember we have discussed like we have objects and arrays, but arrays are also a kind of object. They are basically, we can say, special type of objects, because that is how we are able to access dot length and dot push, dot pop, these things. Because here you can see this is an object where we are calling some method, right? and if it is a method, then it is stored inside of an object, and this is that object. Okay, let's see the arrays. For example, let's make a quick array here, or we can pick this one, this one. Okay, so let's remove these stuff. Okay, so right now we have this array. So first check the type of this Raunak data. Okay, and from here you will start getting the answer of your questions. Raunak data, let's see, it is an array obviously, and let's check the type of now. So it will give us object, because arrays are also another type of object. Remember from the one of the previous lectures we have said, like there are only two types of values. One are primitive and the rest of the other are objects. Okay, so arrays are also another type of object where we can access the methods using dot notation or bracket notation. Okay, so let me show you some quick examples of that. For example, let's say we want to access the length, so we use dot length, right? So it will give me a length of 5. We can use dot or we can use bracket notation as well. Okay, to access the property, because this is a property of Raunak data object, which is this one. Okay, it is still giving me 5. Okay, and this way we can access the pop, push and everything whatever we want. So for example, let's say we want to use pop, so we will access the property like this, and then all we need to do is, since it is a method, this pop is a method, we need to use the parenthesis. And from previous lectures, if you remember what pop will do, if you are using it in the array, it will return the last popped value. So the expected thing is we will get this in console. Okay, because it is going to remove this from the object. Let me again console log Raunak data after using this pop method. Okay, so now what happened, it is coming from line number 367. That means our pop is working just fine. So it is totally clear that array is also an object, and these pop, push or whatever methods we are using, these are all methods of an object. Okay, these are all stored as a property inside of the array object. Okay, so you can see here. Alright, and there is one more thing, as you can already see in the screen, we have console log. And you might already guess this console is also an object, right? And it also contains this log, which is also a method, as we have discussed already in one of the previous lectures. Okay, so this way we can add a property inside of an object and we can make use of it, and we can use the this keyword to manipulate or to add or to access the properties inside of the particular object where that function is stored or called. Okay, and if you think this is the only way, like directly adding a function inside of the object is the only way, then you are absolutely wrong. We can also use it like this: Raunak data 2 dot, let's say, calculate age 3, calculate age 3, and we can store this like so. Okay, and it will also work just fine. So what we need to do is 2024 minus, then we need to pass birth year. Okay, and this will also work just fine. It will store a method inside of this Raunak data 2 object. Let's quickly, I think I have logged it somewhere. Raunak data 2. Let's log it. Here, and if I refresh, then you can already see calculate age 3 is added inside of this object. So we have added a new method which is accepting a parameter, which is this one. So this way we can add a method inside of an object. We can directly add a method inside of an object like this. We can pass some parameter to do some calculations, or if we want to access some existing properties, then we can make use of this keyword. Okay, so this is all about methods for now.